All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. It's Wednesday at 2 p.m., so you know where we're at. Casey, how's it going?
Things are good. Things are good. Yeah, exciting week with some interesting updates. Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of kicking off the call with the couple topics you had in mind. Definitely
Yeah.
some interesting ways things are developing that are going to impact some folks.
Yeah. So if you ever heard me talk, I talk about AI. Why? Because I think it's going to be impactful. And we're already starting to see glimmers of how this is impacting basically the end consumer's behavior. So I want to walk through a blog post here from some of our friends. And I'm going to highlight a few things. So let me get this shared real quick. We're going to skim through this because this is like a massive post, but there's only a few things that I really want to highlight here. The first one is this guy right here. So AI search tools impacting customer behavior. Artificial intelligence search capabilities enhanced by ChatGPT and one of my personal favorite tools, Perplexity platforms, are fundamentally restructuring e-commerce search patterns. Marketplace analytics indicate a projected surge in AI-mediated referral engagement with anticipated growth from current 1% penetration to 20% market share within a 12-month period. Okay, so what does that mean? What they're saying here is that a non-zero amount of people, so right, as of, this post, roughly 1% of buyers are utilizing tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and what have you to find products, which is different than what they're used to doing. And this is the same thing that we're seeing with tools like Perplexity and Google.com. A lot less people are starting to use regular Google and they're just using Perplexity for their searches. So there's this behavioral shift that's occurring. Now going from 1% doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but scaling up to 20% market share in a 12-month period is a big deal. When you have that much of your market, of your customers changing their behaviors, you have to react to this. And the second part that I didn't cover here yet is this transformation needs a strategic adaptation from Amazon Marketplace participants, particularly in content optimization protocols, incorporating enhanced contextual frameworks and verified consumer validation metrics. Again, what does that mean? I'll tell you. Here's what that means. It means that as sellers, the listing content will most likely need to change. It will need to shift. Right now in tech, there's a interesting concept. It hasn't really caught on yet, but it is being talked about quite a bit. For websites, you have something called robots.txt. And that's kind of helping Google index your stuff, or you have your sitemap.xml. It's basically a way to say, hey, here's a structured way to understand my website easier. So it makes it easier for search engines like Google, Bing, Yahoo to basically index all your things. It's that same kind of concept, but applying that to products now. Now, what some people are wanting to do is say, okay, well, I have a website, or let's say, I have a developer tool, and there's a lot of documentation on how to work with this thing. Instead of just having the human-based documentation, I'm going to create a agent.xml, kind of like the sitemap, where it's going to break it down in just plain text, and then a large language model can read that, get directed to it, and say, oh, cool, I know exactly what I need. It was easy for me to find it, and I have the full context in a really easy format for me as an agent. Great. So we're going to see something similar, it seems like, for products. Now, are you going to have that for your Amazon products? Probably not. But the content itself may change. And one thing that they mentioned here that's super intriguing to me is this consumer validation metrics. I'm not exactly sure what they're talking about, but if we scroll down and we look at how Amazon's reacting to this, they introduced a tool called Rufus. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. I tried to play around with it. I haven't used it too much. My behaviors on Amazon personally have not quite yet changed because I know exactly what I want most of the time. But here's what they're anticipating. It's a shift. Or it will shift focus from keyword-based ranking. So there goes your listing optimization, SEO, and the way we traditionally understand it, to consumer preference and product quality. So this customer preference, I think, goes hand in hand with what they're talking about, this consumer validation metric, which is can we build a profile, which they already have, by the way? Their recommendation system is pretty amazing. And so can they actually take the preferences that they've seen in your profile from past searches, from past purchases, and whenever you ask that Rufus, I don't know why they called it Rufus. It's the funniest thing in the world to me, but we'll roll with it. If you ask Rufus, hey, I need a power washer for my house, it's going to say, okay, well, what kind would you want? And it's going to basically change what it's serving up to you based on your typical preferences in some way, shape, or form. That could be by cost, that could be by design, who knows? And obviously looking at product quality. So right now, if you think about this, though, this is so interesting because consumers already do this. If I'm like, I want this type of product, but I don't know the brand, what am I personally going to do? I'm going to type in power washer for house. I'm going to go add a few filters that I care about. So I might look at price. I'm definitely going to look at quality. I want 4.5 stars or above. And I'm now weeding through all those things, basically applying my own preferences. So if you take that whole workflow and you can say, well, just let AI do that for you better than you ever could, how does that change that user's behavior? Because now if they can get better results faster in alignment with what they truly want without having to weed through all the listings, it's going to create an incentive where it's less friction. And so buyers over time will start to prefer that kind of thing. It's the same exact thing that I went through with Perplexity. It's a lot less work for me to just get the answer that I want using Perplexity over Google. So my behavior changed. So this is interesting because we talk a lot about AI in terms of like how you're going to use it, how you should be using it, how it's going to affect business owners and stuff like that in a positive way. We really don't talk enough, I think, about how it will change the consumer. So Perplexity created a partnership with Shopify. So I can now technically shop in Perplexity. If I have my shop thing, it knows my address, my payment methods, it knows everything. So I can one click be like, yeah, that's great. I didn't need to go to your website. As long as you're on Shopify and I'm looking for that particular thing, and I can get super detailed, just like you would with a regular large language model, what I'm looking for. I want a pressure washer that's well recommended, well reviewed by a top 3 brand. I want it to be black and I want it to be less than $200. And I want it to feel kind of modern. Okay. If that's being sold on the Shopify platform, I'm now going to see that and say, yep, buy that, please. And I'm done. So we're talking about taking that same concept and now applying that to these platforms like Walmart, like Amazon. And so, we were kind of joking before we jumped in this call, what does this mean? I don't know yet, which is kind of the hard part, right? Some things are pretty obvious, other things less so. My natural inclination is that consumer behavior will change relatively rapidly. I think it will happen. That 12-month mark seems, to go from 1% to 20% seems pretty aggressive. But in thinking about how fast this technology is moving, how many users that are non-technical using things like ChatGPT and Perplexity, I don't think it's unrealistic for that to be possible. Probable, I don't know, right? Let's call it 60% probable, but possible, yeah, I very much think so. So this could usher in some new policies for how listings are measured in terms of quality. Like Walmart has their listing quality kind of measurement. I think Amazon will most likely come out with something similar where it is more focused on AI to a degree. They also stated that they are running or allowing, I'm not sure if this is beta quite yet or not, running sponsored ads in the Rufus response. That's interesting because how are we going to do this now? Because it's probably not going to be keyword based. It's probably going to be contextual. So does your listing match the context of what that person is searching for? If there's enough overlap, we'll serve that up as like number 1 instead of number 5 organically. So your listing optimization, your Amazon SEO kind of stuff will still exist, but I think it will fundamentally change. We're seeing a lot of this in the SEO broad landscape right now. where people are saying, hey, you're not just writing for humans anymore. You are writing for large language models. So it's, it's here. It's crazy. I think it's really cool. Anytime you can get to a world of hyper personalization, I think the better results you get. And so in theory, your conversion rate for some of these products that are getting served up in the Rufus style, model should be pretty high, which is great. So I don't know, that might hurt discoverability a little bit. It could actually just help it. So these are kind of where we're at right now, where there's a lot of things that are changing. I don't think anybody really has the definitive answer as to how this plays out. I think there's a lot of speculation, but the fact of the matter is things are changing, and not just how you use this as a business owner. How are your consumers using this to interact with you, to find you, to purchase from you? Do I really need to go to your website and go through all that if I just know exactly the type of product I want and it matches me? I don't think so anymore. Maybe in the long run, if I built enough loyalty with your brand and stuff like that, but I think that first purchase from discoverability is probably going to be purely transactional from some version of an LLM like Perplexity or ChatGPT.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think the only thing we really do know now, like you said, like a lot of it's kind of just like up in the air. We don't really know how this AI is going to really assess the quality of a listing. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of factors that are either not created or not currently factored into SEO within Amazon and things like that.
Right.
With it moving away from keywords, we can probably, and with the word contextual being used multiple times, we can probably assume that product descriptions are going to become pretty important. But I mean, outside of that, I think the good thing is that it is kind of a 12-month ramp-up period. We'll kind of see how things adjust before we get to potentially that 20% mark. Right now, 1 to 2%. So only 1 out of 100 folks are approaching consumer behavior in this way. So I don't think there's any need to sound any alarm bells or drastically change your process. I think it'll be something to kind of just keep a pulse on and adjust as findings are kind of made public or different announcements are made via Amazon. Like you said, Dylan, before we jumped on, I still use Google, but only when I'm looking for a specific website or link. When I'm looking for an answer or something more detail oriented, I do use Perplexity. I don't really use either for shopping right now. I usually just go to Amazon and type in what I'm looking for or go to a specific brand website. But it's really interesting you mentioned the partnership between Shopify and Perplexity, because so much of that world with it being your own website is about driving traffic to your website. So with Perplexity kind of partnering with them, that's going to drastically change how those folks either spend on ads or don't spend on ads. But I think the good thing is with most sellers being on either Amazon or Walmart, you kind of already have that hub. The traffic's already there. It's just about serving up your specific offer over others. And we just don't know how that's going to change, but will definitely change pretty significantly in the next 12 months, but definitely something to keep an eye on as people make announcements, see how things perform and things like that.
Yeah. It does, luckily, the way I think about this kind of new behavior, I do believe that it puts more emphasis on value. So if we look at like regular SEO for like blog posts, it has evolved tremendously over the last 10 years. There used to be keyword stuffing, like it was super easy to hack. And then it got more, they got more advanced on what they were looking for, right? Does this actually answer questions? What kind of value does this provide? So it kind of forced those people doing, these really crappy blogs to create real value and actually answer the question, not just hit the keyword 15 times and have enough backlinks and then therefore you're done. So if we translate that to what we're probably going to see here on the Amazon side, on really just e-commerce, I think that might still hold true, where it's okay. Well, it's not just about you have a product. It's, adding context to that product. What is the lifestyle of that product? When do you use that product? When do you not use that product? Like being able to give more of that context of like, and it's hard because there's so many different categories here of products we could dive into. But at the end of the day, for something to be served to me via Perplexity, it has to actually answer the question. And so it could have a whole overview of that topic that I'm searching for, but it doesn't answer the question, then where are we at here, right? It's not going to come to me. And so you risk basically losing some of that traffic. So it is going to change a lot. I was reading that they are starting to push the Rufus, interaction to a higher, visual in the UI to try and push more people to it. So it seems like they want more of that. That's going to be very interesting. But this new UX of shopping, searching is very fascinating to me because, like you said, unless I don't really know what I want, I'm probably just going to type in what I want in search. But I also haven't spent that much time playing with this Rufus. I think I did it one time. This was a few months back, but I want to start utilizing it more. But again, there's not a whole lot of use cases for me personally where I'm like, I kind of need this thing, but I don't know what I need. Most of the time I know the exact brand I want. I know exactly where I want, what kind of product I want to get. So I think it helps on the discovery side of things more so than I just need to get more toilet paper. Like, yeah, I'm just going to go do that. I'm not really picky there. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I think it's, from what I'm saying, if I take a step back, this kind of user interaction is applying in every area that is search based. And we were chatting before we hit record here, where if you think about Amazon, it really is a search engine, right? At its heart it's a great search engine. And if Google's being kind of put on the, defensive here because of this kind of technology and this new behavior that they're seeing in consumers, it's very safe to assume you'll see the same kind of behavior shifts in some way, shape, or form for an Amazon that is very search heavy. So again, I don't really have any great answers as to how this is going to change things. I have some theories about, if we get to full market saturation where, the average person is going to use something like Rufus, is going to use something like Perplexity to find products when they don't really know the exact thing that they want, but they know the problem that they have. I do think that it becomes very interesting. In some ways it could hurt discoverability. Whereas with search, if you rank number 20 for, power washer, you're still at number 20. But if somebody says, hey, find me the top 5, you're not in there. And so now the question becomes, well, how do we get into that? What are the qualifications? Is it copy? Is it content? It's going to be product quality. That's pretty explicit. So in a way, it kind of gets rid of the low quality products outside of your view, which I kind of think is a good thing. Like, I don't really want to look at like 30 crappy products to find one that's really solid that a lot of people may not know about because they're just not great at SEO on these platforms. So yeah, my mind's going a million miles an hour trying to parse through how this could play out. But from a consumer standpoint, I do prefer it. I really do. I think it's pretty nice. I've played around with the Perplexity Shopify integration. It's phenomenal, to be honest. But from the business side, I think it is, and again, we've mentioned this countless times, 2025's theme, in my opinion, is adaptability. We're going to see a lot of things be shifting around. So I think it will add a lot of value in a lot of ways, and I think it will make some things harder, but that creates an incentive for you to have amazing products. And I do think off the top of my head that this will apply to, or that this will impact private label brands more so than your resellers. That's where my mind's immediately going to. I can't back that. My reasons for that, though, is you're probably going to see a big shift in impressions. So you'll probably see, once this gets up to that 20-ish%, you'll probably see a decline in most likely impressions. And if you're still showing up in Rufus searches, then your conversion rate will probably be higher. So you're kind of trading impressions for higher conversion rate, which might, equal themselves out. It may not. resellers, it's hard to quantify without actually having data on this, how that's going to impact them. It could be negligible. It could be a large amount. And also you got to factor in, for a brand, it's one seller. For resellers, you have multiple sellers on that listing. So I imagine they're still looking at the buy box winner for who they're serving up in that, outside of running sponsored ads, of course. So if that's true, then that buy box becomes even more critical than it possibly did before. But yeah, man, I mean, this is a whole new paradigm, in my opinion. So there's going to be a lot of trials and tribulations. There's going to be a lot of experimentation. New strategies, I think, need to get tested. I think the best practices for Amazon SEO, listing optimization, things like that will need to be reevaluated as we start to see the negative impact and positive impacts of this shift from consumer behavior.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with your point around private label. That's something that I was going to say. With private label competitors, you're really not competing with other people on your own listing. You're really competing against other listings. So that's where AI's serving up of recommended products will become really important, because like you said, if someone says, give me the top 5 lawnmowers, if your brand isn't a top 5 lawnmower, you're not showing up. Whereas if you're a reseller, you're one of a handful of people selling one of those top 5 potentially. So that's where, obviously, like you said, buy box does become more impactful and more important. And then, the quality of product thing is interesting because it's like vague enough that it doesn't provide a lot of detail to make a lot of assumptions on. But I think one assumption that I would maybe make would be that seller rating potentially becomes more important. Just because if you have multiple sellers selling a new item, technically the quality of that product is the same across those sellers. So that's where maybe defaulting back to seller rating becomes more important. I mean, as we know right now, the buy box is a combo of price, shipping, and seller rating. But outside of that, we don't really know where it values one of those factors more than the other. So maybe that will become more clear moving forward. But definitely something to keep in mind, especially if you are a PL seller, maybe taking some notes from some of your competitors on how they're describing their products, kind of pitching their products in those product descriptions and adjusting accordingly. But I think doubling down on the adjustability and the ability to be fluent this year is going to be very important, especially as more updates like this come through.
Yeah, one thing that just came to mind, when I did wholesale, I loved running PPC ads to my products. I know I'm going to carry them for a long enough time horizon. If the math works out, we're great. I can keep scaling. PPC can be very expensive, especially if you're going up against a brand as a reseller. They can spend way more. Their margins are way higher. But being able to have sponsored product ads in this Rufus response, again, I do think, and this is just me spitballing here, that the conversion rate would be much higher. And it's, if you think about the UI of it, it's like in a chat. So like there's not a bunch of extra stuff all around that kind of helps you focus, which that alone can help with conversion. But it may make running PPC ads within Rufus really a huge growth lever, especially, I mean, definitely on PL, but on wholesale as well. And I think if you're running wholesale, at least the way I used to do it, I kind of treated each product like a PL, where like I wanted to tweak the listings. I wanted more impressions and more search volume and stuff like that. Impressions are great, assuming your conversion rate is holding steady, right? Like if I double your impressions, but I also cut in half your conversion rate, it's a null point. And this kind of goes back to what I was previously saying, where I think you might hit a decline on the impressions, but an incline on the conversion rate, which may help offset it. And again, I'm just spitballing here, just trying to think through this in real time. But yeah, it could be a huge opportunity. But I do think it's going to be a big shift that if you're not paying attention to these kind of things, you're probably going to find yourself at some point this year seeing some negative things and not knowing how to fix it, because you're not understanding that this is a consumer behavior problem or shift. It's not really a problem, it's a shift, and not just a product listing issue necessarily. So when those things happen, it's really difficult. And Amazon seller, just resellers, we're not really keen on thinking about that kind of stuff, because Amazon, Walmart, they handle all that. They handle all the demand. We just handle the supply side. But that demand side, because it's shifting so rapidly, could affect you. And I think you do need to be aware of these things. You know, being a reseller, carrying, 1,000 plus SKUs, you're not going to be in there doing listing optimization. I get it. If you're doing wholesale, you should be anyways. You should be optimizing every single one of your listings for higher quality, better search rankings, stuff like that. But there again, every time we have a problem or a shift, we find a solution as humans. So it seems very likely, just like we have listing optimization software where we say, here's the keyword I'm looking for, here's what I have, help me kind of make this better, give me some kind of measurement to know that I improved it. We'll probably have something similar on the AI front once we get to that point where it's like, okay, we kind of understand what Amazon's looking for. We can analyze a lot of data to understand what works and what doesn't work, even if they don't explicitly tell us that. And now we have this grader where you could basically say, hey, here's the ASIN. How do I make it better? And have the AI basically help you. I mean, this is what's crazy about this, right? You can have a shift with AI and then use AI to help with that shift in AI. And so it's AI all the way down. So this is where it kind of makes you hallucinate and, have mad inventor syndrome almost. So a lot of these things, again, no answers, but things you need to start paying attention to. And if you can get ahead of the curve, you're going to be well positioned before everyone else, because a lot of people are going to be behind the line on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. And I think you make an interesting point with potential like drop in impressions and raise in conversion rate. I mean, the whole point of adjusting this consumer functionality or consumer searching functionality is to serve those folks with the products they're looking for more quickly. So in theory, if you're that product being served up, the people that are looking at it are even that much closer to the finish line of purchasing your product, but you just may be served up less than in the past. So yeah, definitely not to continue on the speculation front, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But
it's almost like a dating match app, right? It's like, here's the consumer's preference. Here's what you offer. Does that equal? If so, there you go. And that's what they were looking for. So problem solved. If not, sorry, you're not going to stumble upon that. And I haven't played with Rufus too much. I'm going to play with it a little bit more tonight. But assuming you can prompt it very similar to a regular LLM, people are going to get really detailed over time as they get more comfortable with it. Initially, people, like with ChatGPT, I say this all the time, they're super broad. Eventually they understand, if I give it more context, it gives me better results that I'm really looking for. So I have to communicate better. And listen, I've used Rufus on a product image or a product listing where I'm like, hey, does this fit this kind of car or whatever? And it'll just be like, yes or no. And it'll surface up, somebody asked that. I don't have to go search for it. That's kind of cool. But I do like that they're taking this concept and saying, okay, it's not just about helping you answer questions. What if we can help you find the product that you're actually looking for? So we're seeing a lot of innovation on these things where they start really small and then they realize, actually, there's a consumer shift here. Maybe we should, enhance this quite a lot. I saw a release today from Superhuman, the email client, which I use. I love it. Some of the manual stuff I've been doing, like organizing my inbox, they're like, oh yeah, we'll just do that for you now. We'll just automatically categorize, label, and split your inbox for you, and all these other things that you do manually. It's like, that's just an email app. But they're looking at how people are using it and saying there's a lot of commonality here. Now we're at a point with technology, with these large language models, with AI, where we can actually solve that problem now, where previously that was just not physically possible. It was way too complicated, inflexible, not worth it. Still a lot of, behavior on the user side work on the user side that they have to do. And now it's like, no, we'll just do it for you. It's like, okay. And now I'm refreshing my email client. I'm like, give it to me. I want it like now. So we're seeing this innovation happen so rapidly. And I'm so happy to see this happen in our space, because a lot of times we're very much behind in a lot of the cutting edge tech, but because it's moving so fast, it's so readily accessible, people are experimenting with things. And to me, it's fun. I think it's cool. Obviously, I've countlessly said that, but it is nice to see that these larger platforms are also starting to experiment with this, with us. It's not just the small mom and pop kind of sellers that are trying to hack AI and figure out how to be more efficient and effective and stuff like that. It's also the world's shifting, and we all need to be reacting to that. And I think that's a good thing, because again, I think it gets rid of a lot of the bad products, bad content, whatever. So it's a forcing function of quality, in my opinion, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it makes sense. They're trying to encourage the use of Rufus so they can see how users use it, kind of optimize, and then kind of adjust accordingly. But yeah, it'll be an interesting next few months to see how this develops.
And you could very easily see Amazon coming out with a feature that says, hey, you were pretty close at being serviced up in these things, basically missed opportunities, right? Out of 100% of the opportunities you kind of could have been in, you only got 40%. Here's the things you should change to change that. And it could be, hey, your product description needs to be more flexed out, or your product title is not really matching up here. So again, they're using AI to serve this stuff up. They could also be using a different AI with that data to say, hey, here's how to make it better. And, a better variation of that is it just does it for you, right? I mean, if Amazon wants better products and better product listings and all these things, could they find a way to either just make the recommendations or kind of just do it for you? I don't know. So yeah, it's a whirlwind already of 2025, and it's what, February 19th? Yeah. It's already felt like 3 months, possibly more. So pretty cool. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are shifting right now. I'm trying to stay away from the fees and all that stuff, because we all already expect that. All that stuff's pretty obvious. I like servicing this more subtle things that a lot of sellers may just skim over and be like, oh, that's kind of cool, but whatever. It's like, actually that's the impactful thing in the long run here for everyone. And one thing here too, one thing we didn't cover that might be cool is something called Cosmo. So this kind of goes hand in hand with what we've been chatting about. So Cosmo, Common Sense Knowledge Generation, is an AI system that allows product searches using traditional keywords matching to understand customer intent. So I wanted to highlight this because I think it helps add a little bit more clarity to what we're saying, and like that transition from search-based to intent-based, which if you've been in marketing, you kind of understand what I'm saying. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is. So like in paid acquisition, so in paid ads, Google is a search-based engine. So I'm looking at keywords or phrases or things like that. Whereas with a LinkedIn or Facebook, it's profile-based. So Google's kind of on the intent side, because I can kind of understand based on what the keywords are, what your intent is. If it's buy, best Amazon repricer, I'm probably assuming you have a high intent of finding a repricer. If you're just kind of looking for some knowledge, I understand the intent is much lower. I can basically reverse engineer your intent. And it looks like they're trying to do the same thing here. So this system is designed to allow for targeting consumer intent rather than just keywords. And this is where you get that hyper personalization. What are they really trying to do here? So sellers should now need to ensure titles, descriptions, and back-end attributes align with the reason customers search. So if I'm looking for a grill, I think there's indoor grills. I don't know. Heaters. This is a good one, right? Those propane heaters. There are ones for inside and one for outside. So if I look for one and I'm like, I need an inside heater, don't show me an outside heater. That needs to be obvious from the product's copy and content. So that's really going to help with a lot of those things. And again, those are the kind of things that are going to increase your conversion rate. Because if I go to your product listing and it's only outdoors, well, now I just wasted time. I'm kind of annoyed, and I'm definitely not going to purchase because I don't need that. I need an indoor one. So sellers would need to move on from volume-based keywords to intent-driven targeting for ads. Here's the big question. How do you do that? A lot of what sellers are used to on the ad side of thing is keywords. That's the whole thing. How do you pick good keywords? You got discovery campaigns, all these different things. But again, shifting. So intent. We don't really know what that means quite yet. They could still be using keywords to understand intent. So it may be that the way you're doing your ads is it's a collection of terms. So I might do indoor. I might then also do, heater or something like that, right? I don't know. I'm kind of speculating here, but it's definitely going to be a big shift. See, Artem, so you're saying intent keywords may be different than keywords. Yes, in theory. When you're going to intent versus keywords, there is some overlap in that Venn diagram depending on how they do it. And this is the big question. We don't know. We don't really know exactly how they're going to be doing this. So it is possible that the way you're using those keywords are very different than what you're used to. They may find some interesting overlaps. See, Karen, like re-adding between the lines. Kinda. Yeah, exactly. You're on the right track there. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to, right? It's like we're kind of choosing these broad things that would kind of give the impression of an intent, right? That might be what they're going for here. Again, I don't know. The way they do this could be vastly different, but we're going to find out. So, see, Prince. I was asking ChatGPT about regional buy boxes this morning, and unprompted, it brought up Aura. Let's go. Love to hear that. It said Aura doesn't see regional buy boxes directly, but infers them through sales trends, stock levels, and pricing behavior. One particularly interesting thing it pointed out was that Aura tracks what percentage of the time you hold the buy box. If your buy box share changes without a price adjustment, that means regional shifts are happening. Any additional thoughts? Huh.
Yeah. I have some thoughts because that's not fully accurate, which is funny. In terms of like our, go ahead.
But it brings, so this is inferred, right? Keep in mind, it's going to infer a lot of things, but it is an interesting thing. If the prices aren't shifting and the buy box percentage is changing, assuming we're not all just rotating, it is possible that that could be the case. I don't think that is the case or that is the reason, but I love that Aura came up in ChatGPT. That's fantastic. Casey, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah. And one thing there, Prince, just to point out, Aura does pick up on regional buy boxes. So if you ever are on a listing page and you click that buy box price, if there are regional buy boxes, you will see 2 sellers being listed as a buy box winner. So that's going to be a good way to identify if you have a regional buy box going on. Obviously, there's only one buy box winner. There's going to be only one. There's then not a regional buy box situation. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out, and it is interesting that ChatGPT kind of took an educated guess there. We don't necessarily serve up the information that you're dealing with a regional buy box. Typically, regional buy boxes, there's one FBM seller that's good for a specific region and then a different offer for everybody else. But you can identify that by looking at the other offers on that listing. And then, the buy box percentage is a little bit different with Aura, just because with us being a repricing tool, it doesn't show percentage of time that you're in the buy box. It's actually the percentage of pricing updates that put you into the buy box. So slight different term of measurement for that buy box performance there. I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dylan, if you're looking for the actual time in the buy box, that can be found within Seller Central. Just wanted to fact check ChatGPT there for a second.
Yeah. That's the thing about these LLMs. You got to fact check them because sometimes it's very convincing. You're like, oh, totally makes sense. And you're like, actually, that's wrong, but that was rational. That was a rational thought. And just for context, the difference between the way we're calculating that buy box, like Casey just said, versus like checking the report, when we measured it, it was within like 1% to 2% difference. So it's still 98 to 99% accurate against the whole thing. So that will help. see, Perplexity over ChatGPT. Yes, Perplexity gives you more up-to-date information because it's going to go out and research it. ChatGPT has a cutoff knowledge point unless you're using the web browser version of it with some of the models that they allow. I like Perplexity for this kind of thing because it will go find the answer and I can have follow-up conversations pretty well, and it can continuously find new answers and all that stuff. ChatGPT, I'm not a huge fan of on knowledge retrieval, if that makes sense. If I'm trying to understand something that's like well understood, like a big topic, big subject that like hasn't changed that frequently, I can probably do that and be okay with it. But if you want really up-to-date stuff, I would definitely go over with Perplexity.
Yeah, I think ChatGPT is good for like how to do something, whereas Perplexity is like how things operate. Is kind of like a simple way to break it down in my head. If I'm ever trying to plan a vacation, ChatGPT is great. But if you want to know where to go on vacation, you want to use Perplexity.
Yeah, like I'm not going to ask ChatGPT for like hotel recommendations for a given location while traveling, but I'll go to Perplexity and do that just to get started. Yeah, that's the hard part about a lot of these things. And so, you know, these tools like Rufus and all these different things, they're using these same kind of models, but they're adding safeguards on top of them and giving them more context, which does make them perform better, but it's still not going to be perfect necessarily. But yeah, it's again, you kind of have to retrain your brain with a lot of this stuff, and that's hard in a lot of different areas. So some areas super easy for me. Other areas, the habit, like Amazon searching for a product, like I've already mentioned, it's such a, I don't even think about it. It's kind of like, you know, when you drive from A to B and you're like, I don't remember between A and B at all. I remember leaving and arriving, but nothing in between. That's just straight up subconscious. Like the pattern's already there. You know how to do it. You don't even need to be conscious to do it. I have that same thing with certain behaviors like on Amazon, but if I'm intentional about it, I could break that. And if I have a friend who I really respect, they're like, no, this is how you do it. And it's better. I promise you. And I try it and I do like it. I'll change my behavior. And I think that's what we're starting to see a lot more is, especially with things like TikTok, the life hacks, use this tool over that tool. I see a lot of this right now. Your average person is trying Perplexity. Your average person, like your parents are trying ChatGPT. You know what I mean? Like my parents ask me about AI now. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like it's not just this crazy nerdy thing. I mean, it still is, but the regular run of the mill stuff that we all take for granted for the most part is already getting out to the mainstream. I mean, the daily active users for ChatGPT is incredibly high. So you have a lot of people that are starting to get comfortable with that type of interaction and are open to seeing that type of chat interaction in other software that they're already used to. They're at least willing to experiment and try it. And then it just comes down to quality and, outcomes and performance and stuff like that. See, Luke, I spent my whole life learning how to Google for best results. Now I feel like I have to reprogram my mind for AI 1000%. I like the Google dorks and like all the different like hacks you can do in Google. I got real big into that at one point, phrase matching and then the or does not contain this and like really parsing that out. And now you're still doing that. You're just using regular language, right? So instead of me saying, I want to find that a lamp heater and I don't want outdoor, so I'll do negative outdoor. And I'll put in parentheses or I'll put in quotes indoor. So I make sure that it includes the keyword indoor and it does not include the keyword outdoor. Now I can just say, hey, I don't want an outdoor one. I only want an indoor one. Technically, same thing, but we're using regular human language instead of computer language, which is pretty funny. See, my family quotes AI as truth and reason constantly. Not always truth. There is what's called hallucinations, and you got to fact check it. I had to do this earlier. I was looking up some updates on something, and something didn't add up. I was like, go check your sources again, and quantify the date. And it was like, oh yeah, half that was wrong. Okay. You're so confident, but now I got half the results. But hey, that's how it goes. Luke, Artem, glad we could facilitate you guys hanging out. Love it. Let's see, Artem. That's funny. I'm constantly reminding my kids that AI can hallucinate and lie, kind of like how we were all warned about Wikipedia. Yeah, just like humans do. We don't have the best memories. We hallucinate all the time. So it's a very human characteristic, but unfortunately has followed up into large language models, which luckily gets less and less problematic as one of two things happen. The models get better themselves at understanding what the heck we're talking about. And two, we communicate with large language models better. That alone helps.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if ChatGPT or just AI models proactively like served up its sources and references so you could check those. That's how I used to write papers in college. I would go to Wikipedia and then I would go to the resources section and I would just use like the resources that you can actually check and see if it makes sense or is quality.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is funny. Yeah, I forget what the question was, but my roommate was playing around with ChatGPT the other day and it was like blatantly wrong like 4 times in a row. Like, oh wow, that's pretty funny. But yeah, always double check that info.
Sometimes detrimental, depending on what you're doing. Sometimes funny, sometimes like, oh, that's actually a big deal. That's why I like Perplexity. It will give you a fact and then link out to the resource, and you can go and verify it yourself. Relatively easy, which is good. See, my girlfriend will ask the most general question, and it will be like, "Look, I love it." So not only is it helpful, it is also entertaining, which is fun, but. Yeah, it's again, I like to tell people when they're like, okay, I get it, Dylan, all these things are shifting. What do I do? Had this conversation last week with a group. They're like, how do I just get started with this stuff? Just try Perplexity. Just start asking questions to Perplexity, start asking your questions to ChatGPT, get better at communicating what you want. So if you have some context, give it that context. Even if it's not written beautifully, I will brain dump things where I'm like, I kind of have an idea what I'm talking about, but I cannot put it into words, and I will tell it that I cannot put this into words. Here's what I'm thinking. Help me understand what the heck I'm trying to say. And it will come back beautifully. And I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Use this all the time because my writing is horrible and I have the gist down. I'm like, just make this clear, please. Because the way I wrote it, not clear at all what I'm saying. It's a rant. And it will do that pretty well. Let's see. Does anyone mess with Copilot in Office? I have not. We're all Apple fanboys over here. So everybody at Aura uses Mac laptops. I personally don't like Microsoft, to be frank. I don't like the software. I don't like the operating system. So I have not used it. I have used some of the Google stuff. So like Google Docs will have some kind of stuff in there. I haven't gone over the deep end on that, but just like autocomplete and stuff has been super helpful for me. But Casey, have you used any of like the Copilot stuff?
No, I used to be a big user of like Microsoft Office and their whole suite of products like throughout college. But since then, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides really covers everything that I need there. So I've been more operating in like the Google space when I need a product like that. As you know, Dylan, I frequently use Google Docs for email copy and different things to share with you. I haven't really played around with Copilot or like the native AI tools within Google really, because I don't really need them when I'm doing what I'm doing in there. I would be interested to see like what they provide in terms of functionality, whether it's like we use a couple different tools. Our support tool Intercom, for example, you can write a response and then have AI tailor it. You can have AI, summarize different conversations, but it'd be interesting to see like the actions you can take with Copilot within those different products and how it differs from PowerPoint to Word, for example. But sorry, I don't have much experience directly with that right now.
I will say, in testing outside of the tab complete in Google Docs, I tried the Google like draft writer for like Gmail. I was not very impressed. I use Superhuman and they have their own version that they've tweaked and made better, and it's phenomenal. So I kind of have this bias where I honestly don't want to use anything that my operating system built. I want to use something that a team of cracked engineers, a bunch of nerds got together and said, let's build the best version of this. And that's all we care about. That's what I've been leaning towards. So using tools like, Superhuman for stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
This is interesting. I saw recently an article referencing a study that said that aging LLMs start showing human signs of mental degradation. Have you heard that? And what do you think? Okay, so we have to kind of parse this out. So we have to define aging in LLMs. What my assumption is here is as you have a long running conversation. So to me, that's aging, not just like the model itself was written a year ago. I don't think that's true. What you have is context. So each model has a different context, and a context is basically tokens or, word characters. And let's say it has 200,000 tokens of context. That's how much it can keep kind of remembering. Eventually you get to a point where you start to max that out and it starts to kick out older things and forget. So that creates a problem. So what I do in those cases, if I do have a long running one, I will randomly say, hey, summarize everything we've done up until this point, be as detailed as possible, write me an executive summary, blah, 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 blah. That way I kind of create a snapshot of everything we've done. I kind of summarize it. And then that, if anything gets pushed out of the context, that's still there because it's the most recent thing. So that's kind of a hack for it. I wouldn't really call it dementia. I don't think it's mental degradation. It's losing context, just like humans, right? If I sit here and I just give you a lecture for 8 hours straight, you're probably not going to remember the first half. It's the same concept. It's just our memory cannot keep that much context in mind. Now, what's nice though is the volume or the space of context with these models is going up. So eventually you get to a point where you have what's called infinite memory, meaning like, you have 1 million tokens in a regular conversation. It's probably not going to forget anything. And that will continue to go. So eventually you hit, I'm going to call it an escape velocity, where basically you have enough memory context that technically there's a limitation, but you never get near what that is on your average day. So they're working on that, but it's pretty interesting. Oh yeah. So I haven't used it with Excel and data quite yet. I do like using ChatGPT for manipulating data. Julius.ai is pretty cool too. I haven't played too much with it, but that's a good one as well. Again, I don't love hey, we put AI in this legacy product. That tends to create some problems. I like a tool that comes out and said, hey, we reinvented Excel with AI at the forefront, and that's all we care about. Nice. I'm going to have to change a lot of things. I'm going to have to learn their model, but it's kind of like starting with first principles versus just bolting these things on top. But with that said, I haven't really gone super hard with Excel's AI. I know every time I jump into sheet.new, it throws me the little sidebar and it drives me nuts. I'm like, just get out of my way. I know what I want to do. So yeah. Artem, what kind of problems can you, sorry, I kind of been rambling here. Can you clarify what you mean in regards to what I said about problems?
I think he might be referring to like inputting AI into a pre-existing product, as opposed to like building it with AI, but I could be wrong as well.
Yeah, assuming that's what it is. Adding AI into Office IE. My concern with it is you have this legacy software stack, and then you're putting cutting edge technology on top of that. There's going to be some natural limitations in just what that AI can do because it doesn't have full control, or it's really slow. I like when companies come up and say, hey, we're going to redefine using first principles, how we solve that problem with cutting edge technology. A lot of that legacy code, they're not starting with. So there's going to be a lot of features and functionality that Microsoft Office, as an example, may not be able to add, but a new startup building the AI version of Microsoft Office, whatever tool, can basically solve that problem from the get-go. That could change. That's just my personal bias. That's kind of how I think about these things. And from my experience, what I've kind of seen, again, some things great, other things not so much. Like I'm not going to jump into Google Docs and have it write something for me. I will use it for tab completions because I'm like, that's exactly what I was going to write. Tab, move on. There are better tools for the writing and stuff like that. If I had it all in one, that would be great. But I find that the quality of the responses in some of those kind of platforms are not the best. So looking at Google Suite, Microsoft Office, those kind of things. Yeah, exactly. So, interesting point. Office is like 30 years old software. Exactly. And that's not to say it couldn't work, but it's kind of like adding, ChatGPT on top of the old mainframe computers that fit, into a big thing. It's like, yeah, but like it can't really do anything. It's like multiplying something amazing by 0. It's still just going to be 0. All right, Ali. Hi, I have a question. If you elaborate, please. How does the system calculate the daily profit? Because it seems offset to me. Casey, you want to hit that one?
Yeah, Ellie. So a couple of things to take into account here. First of all, is going to be your costs. So your profit is going to be your revenue minus fees and your entered costs. Specifically in your costs, Aura does already take into account your referral and your fulfillment fees, but any additional prep costs, shipping costs, anything else that you take on to actually sell that product, you want to make sure that's added into that cost, so that's accounted for.
Yeah.
So that could lead to a slight discrepancy. The other piece is that when a sale comes through on a product, Aura is going to estimate those sales metrics based on your current price. Once Amazon does finalize that sale, we do receive that data. That can take anywhere from sometimes a couple days, sometimes a few hours, depending on Amazon's end in that specific product. But once we receive that finalized data, we do adjust those sales metrics. So that's going to include revenue, profit, all of those things. So you might see a slight discrepancy in that scenario where there is that somewhat of a lag in terms of that very detailed, specific, and accurate sales data. But those are going to be the two most common areas that's going to offset those profits or revenues or just sales metrics in general. Just making sure that you have all your costs added properly there. And then that slight delay in sending or us receiving that finalized sales data from Amazon rather.
Yeah. So basically we kind of have to estimate fees in a lot of ways. But once the order is complete, we can say, cool, Amazon gives us the whole package and we can say, that's exactly what it was. Perfect. Lock that in. So you are going to see a little bit of that delay there. So super common. I like to tell sellers that if you pull up 3 different tools, you will see 3 different numbers in some way, shape, or form. And that's usually due to some lag in being able to get data or how they're manipulating the data itself. Let's see. Artem, I was shut down for 4 months. Did I miss anything life-changing with Maven workflows or best practices? Let's see. Last 4 months, yes. So mainly on the best practices. Maven's still crushing it. So we haven't made any changes there. It's doing incredibly well. Workflows as well has changed. So we added an age of inventory filter. So now you can basically shift your strategy to become more aggressive or less aggressive depending on how old your inventory is. And if you go to help.goaura.com, just search up age of inventory. We have a video there. We walk you through exactly how to set that up. It's pretty simple. And that kind of goes hand in hand with best practices. Also in help.goaura.com, if you go to the search bar and type in 3 core strategies, we'll walk you through basically our framework for how you should, like what strategies should you have and how should you move your listings up and down throughout those. It's a good baseline for a lot of people. A lot of sellers come to us and say, hey, where do I get started? What strategies do I need? And we kind of created this life cycle framework that really puts things into perspective for everyone. So like I said, go to help.goaura.com. 3 core strategies is the strategies, those 3. And then age of inventory, if you search that, you'll see the actual workflow change there. Oh, this is funny, Prince. I just called out ChatGPT for its Aura inaccuracies and responded this. LOL, fair enough. I'll take my L on that one. Aura doesn't infer regional buy boxes. I overreached on the analysis. I appreciate the fact check, dude. You want me to issue a public retraction like a disgraced news anchor or we cool. Oh my God. I love that. That's fantastic. All right. So we have to unfortunately wrap up here for time. This has been a fantastic one. I got to geek out with a lot of you guys. So appreciate that. Again, we do this every single Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. EST. But if you have questions, please don't hesitate. Reach out to live chat, talk with Casey, talk with Finn, and let's make sure that we get all your questions answered. Make sure you have clarity and make sure you're set up correctly to crush it in 2025. Casey, any last words?
No last words here. And Luke, yeah, definitely come in to chat with that question. I can provide some more context around Maven versus Amazon. But outside of
Awesome.
that, we'll see you folks next week at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Adios.